This is the second part of the lecture, Mission, Function and Organizational Structure of a Clinical Engineering Services. This part will be about the policies and procedures within a clinical engineering department. We will cover three main points. The first point will be a general introduction about what is a policy and what is a procedure and why we need them. The second point will be an example about a policy and a procedure. To clarify what is a policy and a procedure, the example will be about the hazard recalls and alerts. And the last point will be about the policies or some policies and procedures which are used in the clinical engineering department. Prior to start with the policies and the procedures, we can see in this figure the life cycle of a typical medical device in a clinic in a hospital. The life cycle starts with a request from a medical department, and end with the disposal of this equipment. It can be separated into two main parts, the planning part and the management part. The planning part also can be separated into subparts or phases. Similarly, the management part can be separated into subparts or phases. In order to organize and control the work within the healthcare technology department or the clinical engineering department, we need to establish policy and procedure for each phase and or subpart. Here we can see some typical medical devices or medical device systems in a hospital, like C-arm, X-ray machine, or a surgical operating table, or an MRI machine. So, what is a policy and what is a procedure and why we need them? Policies are statements of the principles and values that guide the organizational activities. In order to be effective, such policies should be flexible, coordinated, comprehensive, ethical, and clear. In order to execute these policies, we need to make procedures in order to execute these policies. So procedures are defined courses of established methods used to achieve an objective. Why we need a policy or policies in general? This is due to the regulations, standards, guideline, and law. And as we said before, the procedure is to execute a policy. We need to write a procedure in order to execute this policy. This diagram also clarify what is the difference between a policy and a procedure. Okay, similarly, this slide also clarifies this point. Now we'll give an example which is about the hazard recalls and alerts in the clinical engineering department, the policy and the procedure about it, to clarify what is a policy and what is a procedure. So the policy of hazard recalls and alerts in the clinical engineering department. In the clinical engineering department shall follow the prescribed course of action for recalls, take such action, and document the actions taken. So why we need such a policy? To ensure that the clinical equipment in the environment of care is safe and consequently poses no threat to the patients or staff, and to ensure that necessary actions are taken to correct any equipment hazard or recall event. In order to execute such policy, we need a procedure. Such a procedure is separated into two steps. The first step The the hazard recalled and alerts are received by the procurement services, which send a notification or a notice for the clinical engineering department. Then the manager of the clinical or director of the clinical engineering department will ensure that the equipment inventory database is reviewed to determine if any hospital equipment will be affected by this recall or alert. And based on this, if the matching is found, then uh, the manager will take the following steps. The first step will be notify the department about the alert or recall, locate the equipment, take the recommended steps described in the alert, make an appropriate entry in the alert database, document the actions taken, and finally notify the department manager of the action taken. So this is a policy and a procedure, one of the policies and the procedures in the clinical engineering department. This is the form for this procedure and policy. So we have a policy, the purpose of this policy, and finally we have the procedure to execute such policy. Here we see a diagram which clarifies the above mentioned policy and procedure. We have recalls and alerts from the manufacturer. We have also informants reports from FDA, for example, if we are in USA or outside USA. We have also a useful source for recalls and alerts from the ECRI. So based on these reports, a notification will be sent for the clinical engineering, a review of our database in order to decide if we need to take action or not. Then if a matching was found or is found, an action will be taken. Then this action should be reported and documented. So now we will talk about the clinical engineering department policies and the procedure. The policies and the procedure used within a clinical engineering department. Prior to that, I will show some devices in different departments like an ICU, which is a neonatal intensive care of neonates, in the radiology department and the operating theaters. So the medical devices can be a small device such as the one here, like a volumetric infusion pump, as the one used usually in the an ICU, or could be an infant warmer, an infant incubator, or could be in a more complicated devices such as the one used in the operating theater, like this surgical table, or an anesthesia machine, or even a AC arm, or maybe more complex, such as the devices which are usually used in the radiology and laboratory departments, like this ultrasound machine or MRI machine. So as we said before, to organize the work inside the clinical engineering department, we should write policies and procedure which control this work. This could be, as we said also previously, a small medical device or even a complex medical device system. The life cycle of a typical medical device can be separated into a planning phase or a management phase. Each one of these phases can be separated into subparts or even phases or phases. So we need to make policies and procedure which cover all the aspects of the life cycle of the medical device in order to control the work and inside the clinical engineering department. In this part, we only talk about a few of these policies and procedures, and mainly in the management part, because due to the limitation of time. Here we can some of the mostly used policies and procedure in the management part. As I said before, I only will cover some of them due to the limitation of time. Uh, in the planning part, I only cover one policy and procedure, which is the medical equipment planning, which will be explained more in the coming lectures. Also, in the management part, I will cover few of the policies and procedure, which also some of them will be covered in the future lectures. Uh, in the planning part, I will cover a policy related to the medical equipment policy and medical equipment planning. In the management part, I will talk about only a few, as I said before, because due to the limitation of time. One of them is the education or the training, the policy and procedure related to the education and training, a policy and procedure related to the incoming inspection. In case we have a new medical device, we need to make an incoming inspection. Then I will talk about the policy and procedure related to the equipment classification system, which based on which we can either a medical device will be included or excluded from a preventive maintenance program. Other policies which also be covered in the management part are the medical equipment inventory management, the IPM, the inspection and preventive maintenance, the medical equipment service request. So when you receive a medical equipment service request from a department, also will cover a medical device tracking in case we have a hazard or recall, hazard alert or recall. Also will cover the policy of and procedure in case an incident happened due to the use of a medical device, and we should make an investigation and how we should organize this work or how to follow such incident. We will talk about the performance of how to study the performance of the clinical engineering department and make a benchmarking. Finally, we'll talk about the storing and retiring of some medical equipment and the reason behind this. Prior to start with these policies and the procedure, we have an old system which was based on the papers. Everything was written or documented using papers, whereas the new system is a computerized one. One of the major advantages of the computerized system is that we can easily generate reports to compare, for example, the current year with the previous years, concerning, for example, the number of the corrective maintenance or the work orders, concerning if there the percentage of pending of work orders generally, if it's related to the corrective maintenance or preventive maintenance. To study the performance within the department. It's also is most cost effective because it saves a lot of times which usually needed by the staff to perform reportings and performance study. Also, another advantage, the existence of the BM scheduler inside this computerized system, which help us and save a lot of time. So now I will start with the first policy and procedure, which will be in the planning part. It's in this policy, first of all, if we need to buy a new medical device, what are the steps to what the policy to related to this, the procurement or purchasing a new medical device. First of all, as we should assess the needs, make a needs assessment. We should determine the required specification and write a specification, send a request for the manufacturers or their vendors, receive offers from these manufacturers or vendors, and make a comparison between them, an evaluation based on the access of based on the ease of use, ease of maintenance, and the operating and life cycle cost. After that, we make our selection for the appropriate medical device. We generate a purchase order with the specification, including the operator and service manual, user and service training, warranty, etc., the accessories, etc. Finally, we make the incoming inspection, and based on the acceptance of the result of this test, we make a payment, a conditional payment for the vendor or manufacturer. So this is the first policy we needed in the planning phase, in case we need to procure a medical device and deploy it in our hospital. Now we will start with the policies and with some or a few policies and procedures in the planning part and the management part. The first one will be about the training and education in the clinical engineering department and in the hospital generally. So we have two types of training. We have a clinical staff training and we have a clinical engineering staff training. The clinical staff training is for operators such as nurses, laboratory technicians, radiology technicians or technologists. Such a training will include a basic operation and the proper use of this device, basic troubleshooting, potential hazards related to the use of this device, and equipment management of this device. The second type of educational or training will be the clinical engineering staff. This training could be for a biomedical technician or a biomedical or clinical engineer. This training could be include a professional training, contains materials related to the professional mission, ethics, conduct, codes and standards. It could be a technical training or material inside this training, troubleshooting and use of the equipment. It could be a clinical equipment operation and inspection procedure related or about the clinical equipment operation and inspection procedures, or the policies and procedures and documentation in general. To clarify the difference between the old system and the new system, which is a computerized one, we'll start with the first policy, which is related to the medical equipment inventory. As we can see in this slide, everything was documented using papers. We start with a control. We give an inventory number for a new medical device. After that, we enter this device into our inventory with the appropriate data for each device, the ID or control number, the description of this device, the manufacturer of this device, model, serial number, vendor, the location, and the date of purchase, and so on. After that, we make a copy of the equipment list for each department, and we make a history file for this device. So we make an update of the equipment list, and we create a history file with this device. All these documents were paper, whereas in the new system, which is a CMMS, which is a computerized maintenance management system, all are computerized. We don't need anymore to make a hard copy or a paper or use paper in order to make documentation of each step. Also, another example will clarify this point. Each medical device has a lot of documents or files related to it. Some of these files is the service reports, which is we are talking about the corrective maintenance. Some of the forms related to the inspection forms, which is related to the IPM or the preventive maintenance and inspection and preventive maintenance. Some of these documents are the operational and service manuals of this specific device, some of them related to the recalls and hazard reports. So we have a lot of files and documents for each device. In the old system, all these files or documents were paper-based. Whereas in the new system, as we can see here, all of these documents or files become electronic or a soft copy. Another point which I want to mention here, this system is only cover the management part of the healthcare technology department or healthcare technology program. In order to cover the whole phase of or the whole department, we need additional part which covers the planning phase. Here also another policy and the procedure in the planning phase, which is the incoming inspection of the medical equipment. When we receive a new medical equipment, what is the procedure we should follow? First of all, we have two tasks. One task is made by the clinical engineer or is achieved by the clinical engineer. Another task is achieved by the biomedical technician. The biomedical technician, equipment technician, should make an inspection of this device, write an inspection form about this device, and make a file or document about this. And while the clinical engineer will make first of all an inventory number for this new medical device and enter it into the inventory of this department or of the hospital, the medical equipment inventory with the related data. Each of this work was in the previous system were paper-based, whereas currently or now computerized or a soft copy. Another policy on the procedure in the healthcare technology management program is the one used to classify if the medical device should be included or excluded from the PM program or the preventive maintenance program. This will be based on a given number. The number will include parameters such as the risk of this device, the maintenance requirements of this device, and the history of this device. Based off this, we will give this device a rating or score, and based on this score, if we have a high score, then this device will be included in the program. If we have a low score or rating, this device will be excluded from the preventive maintenance program. So with this procedure is called risk-based classification. Another policy and procedure in the clinical engineering, which help to organize the work in the clinical engineering department, is related to the preventive maintenance management. We have, first of all, we have the biomedical equipment inventory, based on which we will make a schedule which cover a whole year. In each month, we will make IPMs for certain devices, and we assign these IPMs for biomedical technicians and clinical engineers. After the performance of, after the execution of these IPMs, we make reporting of them. We fill an inspection procedure and forms, which will be documented in their related files. So this is another policy and a procedure. Most of this work currently is done using CMMS, which is a computerized maintenance management system. Another important point in our policy in the clinical engineering is the tagging system for all medical devices. We have different types of tag. We have as we can see here, the paper tags. We have type of paper tags. For example, an inventory tag, which is used with each medical device. We make a label or a tag which contains the control number of this device. Another tag here we can see is used during the inspection. We put the date and the engineer or technician which is performed this inspection. An exam tag is used in case this device will not be included in the IPM program. A storage tag also we can see another type, which is a storage tag. An operator warning tag here in the yellow color. Another tag is a red tag or remove from service in case we show in case of a defective equipment which will be removed from service. Here's another tagging system which is used by Fluke Biomedical for different uses. One point I want to mention here, we can either use a passive type of tagging system such as the one here used, which is a paper type, colored or whatever the type used. We have another type of tagging system is using what we call the RFID tagging system, which is an acronym for radio frequency identification. Such one could be also a passive or active. An active one is more currently used because it's more efficient, which help us to locate each department in the current time. Another policy and procedure in the clinical engineering department is the medical equipment service or repair request. In case of a defective equipment, the equipment user will send a service request to the clinical engineering department. Based on an assignment will be made for a biomedical technician or biomedical engineer, or even is this in case of the in-labor. In case of the out-labor will be sent for the vendor in case which is not such corrective maintenance is not supported internally or inside the department. After that, a service report will be generated which should close the work order which is generated by this service request. A notification will be sent to the equipment user with the equipment about being safe and it can be in service again. And finally, a documentation should be done in the centralized biomedical equipment documentation. This is another policy and procedure which was covered in the previous slides, which is related to the hazard and recall of a medical device. In case we have received a notification about a hazard and recall for a medical equipment which is available in our medical equipment inventory. Another policy and procedure is the equipment related incident investigation. In case we have an incident that happened due to the use of a medical device, an incident investigation should be made in order to prevent the happiness or minimize the happiness of such incident in the future, and consequently minimize further injury to the patients or staff, also to prevent or minimize the damage to the equipment and facilities. We should impound all equipment, supplies, disposable wrappers, and everything. We should identify the witnesses. After that, we will make a notification for the risk manager and the clinical engineering about the situation. We complete the incident report, and finally we should notify the authorities. What we mean by the authorities, for example, like the FDA in the US, we should send a notification in case of a major injury or harm has been caused to the patient or the staff due to the use of this medical equipment. Another policy and procedure is the benchmarking, or the performance of the study of the performance within the clinical engineering department. Is how to measure the program performance and effectiveness. Usually we use what we call the performance indicators. For example, such of the performance indicator, user-related equipment problems, the scheduled or versus the actual inspections, the percent of inspections with the problems found. Finally, I will cover the last policy and procedure in the management phase of the medical device, which is related to the storage or retirement of a medical device. Some devices could be temporarily removed from service due to the failure or some defect in it, or could be completely removed from service due to being obsolete. Obsolete, which means this device is not anymore in the line of production by the manufacturer, and this device will not be supported anymore by the manufacturer. Another reason to be removed from the service or disposal, the cost of repair will be very expensive. This is another reason for the removal of such a device. So to recap, we need policies and procedures for each phase in the medical life cycle of an equipment, and to organize the work within the clinical engineering department. We made a definition. We have made a definition of what is a policy, what is a procedure. We gave an example about what is a policy and what is a procedure, and we used the hazard and the alerts and recalls and alerts. Then we talked about that some equipment could be a simple device or a complicated or complex medical system. And what are the policies and procedures which are needed to organize the life cycle of a medical device and to control each phase. Thank you.